You ever buy something online, buddy? Of course you have. We all have. A chair, a phone, even a damn toaster if you're desperate enough. But here's the thing about Craigslist. It isn't Amazon. It isn't neat. It isn't safe. Craigslist is like a garage sale thrown by the devil himself. You dig around long enough, you'll find what you're looking for, but sometimes what you find is looking for you. And the stories I'm about to tell you, they're not the kind you forget. These are the kind that crawl under your skin, set up shop, and stay with you long after the screen goes dark. So sit back and listen. But don't blame me if you start checking your locks after. Episode 1. The Free Couch. You ever notice how the best deals in life come with the worst kinds of strings attached? No? Well, maybe you're lucky. Maybe you've never had to look at the free section of Craigslist. 2 in the morning because your paycheck is late, your back hurts. And your landlord's been pounding on the door with that kind of smile that makes you want to put your fist through his teeth. That's where this story starts. A couch. Just a couch. It's free to a good home. Now, to most folks, that's not a red flag. People give away furniture all the time. Maybe they're moving, maybe they've upgraded, maybe their wife said, "That ugly thing is not coming into the new house, Carl." Happens every day. But sometimes the reason is something they don't write in the ad, something they don't want to admit even to themselves. And Danny, poor Danny, he didn't think about that, not at first. Danny lived in a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like last night's fried chicken and mildew that never quite went away, no matter how many cans of Febreze he went through. He was 29, worked the night shift at a warehouse that paid him just enough to keep the lights on and a couple 6-packs in the fridge, and his couch. Well, calling it a couch was generous. It was a graveyard of springs and stains. The kind of thing you wouldn't even leave out for the trash guys, without a little shame. When he saw the ad-free couch, slightly used, must pick up tonight, he clicked faster than a rat on a Dorito. The pictures looked good too. Real good. A big, overstuffed thing, suede or microfiber, deep brown, with cushions you could sink into like a warm bath. Danny imagined himself sprawled out on it, beer in hand, the old TV humming static from the corner. For once, maybe he could sit down without feeling like he was about to be impaled by rusted coils. There was a number. Local. He dialed it. The guy who answered didn't give a name. His voice was low, tired. "You want the couch?" "Yeah," Danny said. "Still got it?" "Yeah, still got it." A pause, like the man was thinking about something he couldn't quite say. Then, "You can come by. Tonight. Sooner's better." He gave Danny an address on the other side of town, near the old mill road. Not the kind of place you drive through unless you've got a reason. Danny almost asked why so urgent. But free was free, and his back was screaming for mercy. He grabbed his buddy's pickup-pulled Ford that smelled like motor oil and stale cigarettes and drove out. Now here's the part where I need you to pay attention, because this is the part that doesn't add up. When Danny pulled up to the house, it was, well, let's just say it wasn't the kind of place you expect to find a couch like that. The house was sagging, paint peeling like dead skin, porch light flickering. The yard looked like it hadn't seen a mower in 5 summers. But there it was, on the porch, under a moth-eaten tarp. The couch from the pictures. Only it didn't look quite the same. Maybe it was the light. Maybe it was the way the porch bulb buzzed and cast everything in a sickly yellow. But Danny swore the cushions were deeper, darker, like shadows lived in them. The fabric didn't shine the way microfiber should adjust. absorbed light. The man came out while Danny was staring, middle-aged, hair thinning, eyes bagged like he hadn't slept in weeks. He didn't smile, didn't even say hello, just nodded at the couch.
There it is.
"Looks good," Danny said, though the words felt wrong in his mouth. "Thanks, man. Really appreciate it." The guy didn't answer. Just stood there, arms crossed, breathing through his nose. Danny shifted, coughed. "So, why are you giving it away?" That made the man's eyes twitch just a little. He looked past Danny out into the night, like he was expecting to see something out there. Finally, he said, "Sometimes things outstay their welcome." Danny forced a laugh. "Yeah, I get that. Had a girlfriend like that once." No reaction. "Look," the man said, voice flat. "Take it or don't. But if you do, don't bring it back here." That should have been the moment Danny turned around, got in the truck, and drove away. That should have been the warning loud enough to make any sane man reconsider. But Danny wasn't sane. Was tired, broke, and aching for comfort. He took the couch. Getting it into the truck was a nightmare. The thing was heavier than it looked, like it was holding onto the porch for dear life. Danny swore the cushions pressed back against him, resisting, but he figured it was just the awkward weight. By the time he had it strapped down, his arms felt like rubber bands ready to snap. The man never helped. He just stood there on the porch, watching, silent as a grave. When Danny climbed into the cab and started the engine, he finally spoke again. "Don't fall asleep on it." That was it. Just that. Then he turned, walked back inside, and shut the door. Danny laughed, because what else do you do with something like that? Crazy old coot, probably drunk, probably paranoid. Don't fall asleep on it. Yeah, okay, buddy, whatever you say. But later, much later, those words would echo in Danny's head like a church bell at midnight. Because the thing about free couches, they always come with strings, and Danny was about to find out just how tight those strings could pull. Danny got the couch back to his place a little after midnight. The drive had been rough. Every bump made the straps creak. And once he thought he heard something shift back there, like the cushions had exhaled. He laughed it off, turned the radio up, told himself he was being stupid. By the time he wrestled it through his narrow doorway, he was sweating like a pig and swearing at the cracked plaster walls. His old couch was still sitting in the living room. But he didn't care. He shoved it against the wall and dropped the new one right in the center where the TV light spilled across it. It really did look better here, almost perfect, like it belonged. Danny flopped down, groaning as the cushions swallowed him whole. God, it was heaven compared to the garbage heap he'd been sitting on. His body sank deep, deeper than seemed possible, the suede brushing cool against his skin. For the first time in months, his back stopped screaming. "Worth it," he muttered. "Totally worth it." He cracked a beer, kicked off his boots, and grabbed the remote. Static. The TV had gone to snow, even though he'd left it on a channel before leaving. He fiddled with the antenna, cursed, and finally smacked the side of the set. Nothing but hiss. Danny sighed. "Fine, no TV. Just me and you, couch." He leaned back, finished half the can in one gulp, and closed his eyes. Just for a second, just to rest. That was when the smell hit him. It was faint at first, like old sweat soaked into fabric, but then it deepened, sharpened, sweet rotten stink, like meat gone bad. Danny gagged and sat up. The smell vanished, just like that. He sniffed the air. frowned. Maybe it was the beer. Maybe it was his imagination. He lay back again, and it came back. Stronger. Danny cursed and pushed himself up. He pulled the cushions off, one by one, checking for old stains, mold, anything, nothing. Perfectly clean. In fact, they were too clean. No dust, no crumbs, no loose change hiding in the seams. Nobody owned a couch this clean, unless it was brand new, and this thing sure as hell wasn't new. A shiver crawled down his neck. He dropped the cushions, backed off, and grabbed another beer. He wasn't about to let some weird smell ruin his night. Not when his back felt this good. So he sat again. This time, he left the lights on. The first sound came around 3 a.m. Danny was half asleep, head tilted, when he heard it. A sigh, long low, like someone letting go of breath after holding it too long. He snapped awake, heart thudding, eyes darting around the room. Empty. Just the shadows stretching across his dingy carpet, and then he realized. The sound had come from right beneath him. It's from the couch. Danny shot to his feet. The cushions were still, undisturbed. He pressed his palm against them, warm, warmer than they should have been. Okay, he muttered, pacing. Okay, you're tired, you're drunk, you're imagining things. He turned toward his bedroom. He'd sleep there, forget the couch. But then he remembered the man's words, "Don't fall asleep on it." Danny's skin prickled. Screw that, he thought. Nobody tells me where I can sleep in my own damn house. He dropped back down, pulled the ratty blanket from the armrest, and forced himself to close his eyes. The dream started right away. He was lying on the couch, just like he was, but the room was darker. The TV was on, showing nothing but static, but in the static were faces. Dozens of them, twisting, screaming without sound. He couldn't look away. His body was heavy, pinned. The cushions pressed up around him, almost swallowing him whole. And then he felt them. Hands. Cold, invisible hands sliding up his legs, across his chest, gripping his arms. He tried to scream, but his mouth filled with ash. Somewhere far away, he heard a voice whisper, "Don't fall asleep on it." Danny woke with a jolt, gasping, covered in sweat. The room was silent. Too silent. The clock read 3:33. The smell was back. Stronger than ever. And this time, he wasn't imagining the stain. It spread across the cushion beneath him, dark and wet, blooming like a flower. Danny scrambled off, heart in his throat, as the stain shimmered in the lamplight. Red. Dark red. Blood. Danny spent the rest of the night sitting in the kitchen. Chain smoking, every light blazing. He didn't dare look at the couch again, but by morning, it was clean. Perfect. No stain, no smell. Like nothing had happened. He almost convinced himself it really had been a dream. Almost. Except for the shape pressed into the cushions. A shape the size of a body. Over the next week, things got worse. The couch didn't just sigh anymore. It groaned. Sometimes at night, Danny swore he heard whispers rising up from the cushions. Words just out of reach, like a radio tuned between stations. Sometimes he thought he saw faces ripple across the fabric when the TV light flickered. And always the dreams. The hands. The voices. It's the feeling of being dragged down, deeper, deeper, into a place where the air was thick and screaming never stopped. Danny stopped sleeping. he stopped eating. His friends stopped coming over. He didn't want them near it. The couch filled the whole apartment, in his mind if not in reality. It was all he could see. Finally, one night, he snapped. He grabbed a can of gasoline from the storage closet, doused the thing, and lit a match. The fire roared up fast, hungry. The couch burned, but not like furniture should. It didn't crackle or crumble, it shrieked, high and thin like a child in pain. Danny stumbled back, covering his ears, tears streaming down his face. The neighbors pounded on the walls, but he couldn't hear them, only the couch. When the fire died, nothing was left. No ash, no springs. Just a dark, perfect outline burned into the floorboards. Danny thought it was over. He thought wrong, because later, when the smoke cleared and he dared to step into the room, he found it waiting for him. The couch, whole, untouched, sitting there like it had never moved. When he collapsed to his knees, screaming, the cushions sighed, as if they'd been waiting for him all along. They found Danny a month later lying on the couch. His body was pale, wasted, as if every drop of life had been drained away. The cushions were spotless, perfect to clean. And when the paramedics lifted him, the couch sighed again. Episode 2, the babysitter ad. You ever notice how the worst mistakes in life don't feel like mistakes when you make them? They feel harmless, ordinary, like answering a classified ad. That's how it was for Claire. She was 19, fresh out of high school, and stuck in that dead zone between what comes next and what the hell do I do now. Her friends had gone off to college or trade school, her boyfriend had shipped out to basic training, and Claire was left in her mother's tiny ranch house with a pile of bills and a part-time cashier job that paid in nickels and dimes. So when she saw the ad on Craigslist, babysitter wanted, one night only, good pay, call after 6, it seemed like fate had thrown her a bone. She needed money. They needed help. What could go wrong? Plenty. The number was local. Claire dialed it, chewing her lip, bouncing her knee against the table. A woman answered. Her voice was warm but distant, like she was speaking through layers of gauze. You're calling about the ad? Yes, Claire said. The babysitting job? Yes, it's for our daughter. Just one night while we're out. It's very simple. She's already asleep by the time you'll arrive. You'll just need to stay in the house. Claire asked about pay, trying to sound professional. The woman offered a figure that made her blink twice. Way too much for one night. That's really generous, Claire said. Silence on the other end. Then, it's important we find the right sitter. That should have been the first warning bell. Instead, Claire smiled into the phone and said, "When should I come by?" The house sat at the edge of town, where the streets turned from cracked pavement into gravel and the woods pressed up close against the road. It was larger than Claire expected, 2 stories, steep roof, shutters that hadn't been painted in years. Not creepy exactly, but old, heavy with silence. A man answered the door. He was tall, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that didn't quite meet hers. He smiled too wide. "You must be Claire. Come in." The inside smelled faintly of cedar and something else she couldn't place. Something metallic. The woman from the phone appeared in the hallway. She was pale, with hair the color of straw and a smile that never touched her eyes. "We're so grateful you could come," she said. "Our daughter is already asleep upstairs. You won't need to disturb her. Just stay here. Make yourself comfortable. Claire nodded, forcing a smile. The woman's voice was exactly the same as on the phone, soft, blurred, like it was coming from far away. Do you have any rules for me? Claire asked. The woman's lips twitched. Don't go into her room. She needs her rest. Everything else is fine. Claire laughed nervously. I think I can manage that. They gave her the number of the restaurant where they were going, told her they'd be home by midnight, and left. The house fell silent. Claire sat on the couch, scrolling her phone, listening to the clock tick. Easy money, she told herself. The kid's asleep. Just sit here, watch TV, and pocket $100. But then the floorboards above her creaked. At first she ignored it. Old houses make noise. She told herself it was the pipes, the wind, whatever. But then it came again. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Back and forth across the upstairs hall. Claire frowned, set down her phone, and listened. The steps stopped. Then a soft tap tapped against the wall. Her heart skipped. The child. Maybe she wasn't asleep after all. Claire stood, hesitated. The parents had said don't go into her room, but maybe she needed water. Maybe she'd had a nightmare. Hello? Claire called up the stairs. Silence. She took one step, then another, the old wood groaning under her sneakers. When she reached the landing, the hallway stretched before her, lined with closed doors. One at the far end stood slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness spilled out. Sweetie, Claire whispered. You okay? The door creaked wider. Something moved inside. Claire's skin prickled. She took another step, peering in. The room was dark, curtains drawn, stuffed animals lining the shelves. A small bed sat against the wall, covers rumpled, but it was empty. Hello? She said again, voice trembling. The closet door clicked shut. Claire nearly screamed. She backed out, heart hammering, slammed the bedroom door, and ran downstairs. She sat on the couch, trembling, telling herself she imagined it. Nerves. Just a creaky old house. But upstairs, something moved again. Slow, heavy steps across the hall, and a voice. Hi, childish Claire. Claire froze on the couch, blood roaring in her ears. The voice was faint, high-pitched, the kind of whisper kids use when they're trying not to get caught. But it wasn't playful. It was knowing, like the child. If it was a child, it already knew her name. Claire forced a laugh, though her throat was dry. It's very funny. She called up the stairs. Your parents said you were supposed to be in bed. Silence. The air in the living room grew heavier, pressing down on her chest. Claire grabbed her phone, thumb hovering over the call button, thinking of dialing the parents. But what would she say? Your daughter's playing tricks? I think I heard her whisper. She'd sound insane. She swallowed hard. Look, she called again. I'm just here to help. If you need water or anything, just tell me, okay? For a moment, she thought it was over. The house settled into quiet again, the clock ticking too loud, the fridge humming. She picked up her phone, tried to scroll, anything to distract herself, then creak. One slow step, then another. And another. Something was coming down the stairs. Claire stood, clutching the phone like a weapon. Her mouth was desert dry, her legs trembling. The staircase was dark, the shadows too thick. She could just make out the banister, the curve at the top. And then she saw it. A hand, small, pale, curling around the railing. "Sweetheart," Claire whispered, though her voice cracked. The hand froze, and then slowly, too slowly, it pulled back into the shadows. Claire's heart lurched into her throat. She backed toward the door, fumbling with the lock, ready to bolt out into the night. To hell with the money. But just as she turned the deadbolt, her phone buzzed. The parents. She snatched it up, answering with a shaky hello. The woman's voice, calm as ever, drifted through. "Everything all right, Claire? No?" The word burst out of her. "Your daughter's awake. She's wandering the house, whispering," and the woman cut her off. Claire froze. Claire froze. "What?" "She never wakes at night," the woman said. "Not anymore. That's why we wanted you, to make sure." The line crackled, faded. Claire's pulse pounded in her ears. She wanted to scream at the woman, demand an explanation, but the call dropped. Dead silence. No dial tone, no static. Just gone. And in that silence, from directly behind her, the voice came again, soft, high, right against her ear. "Claire." She spun, back, pressed against the door, phone clattering to the floor. No one there. The staircase loomed empty. The hallway stretched silent. But she knew she wasn't alone. Claire forced herself to move, stumbling toward the kitchen, searching for anything. A knife, a flashlight, anything. Her hands shook as she yanked open drawers, clattering utensils onto the counter. Behind her, the floorboards creaked. Slow, steady, coming closer. You grabbed the biggest knife she could find, whirled, and held it out in front of her. "Stay back!" she shouted, though her voice was breaking. The air grew colder, breath puffed in front of her lips. And then from the dark doorway, something stepped forward. Not a little girl, not even close. Small, yes. Child-sized, but wrong. Too thin, limbs too long, head tilted at an impossible angle. Its eyes were wide and white, no pupils, glowing faintly in the dark. Its mouth stretched into a smile that was too big, splitting the skin at the corners. "Claire," it whispered. The knife nearly slipped from her hands. She stumbled back, heart hammering, tears stinging her eyes. "What are you?" she breathed. "Duh!" Thing tilted its head, bone cracking with the movement. "I'm the one they can't keep asleep." Claire bolted. She didn't think, didn't look, just ran. The front door wouldn't budge no matter how she yanked. It was like the lock had melted shut. She sprinted to the back door, same thing. Windows rattled, but none gave way. The house had her, and the thing was coming closer. She heard it behind her, the soft patter of two long limbs, the scrape of nails on the floorboards. Its whisper followed her from room to room, curling into her ears. "Claire, stay with me. Stay awake." She stumbled into the upstairs hallway, desperate, lungs burning. If she could just find the parents' room, maybe a phone, maybe a way out. She slammed open the first door she found and froze. It wasn't a bedroom, it was a nursery. Not the girls' room, the real nursery, sealed off. The walls were painted with fading animals, the crib covered in dust, toys scattered across the floor. And in the crib lay a bundle, small, wrapped in a yellow blanket. Too small. Claire's breath hitched. She stepped closer, hands trembling, pulled the blanket back. Inside wasn't a child. It was a doll. Porcelain, cracked, eyes wide open, staring at her. Its mouth was painted into a permanent O of surprise. Claire dropped it, gagging, stumbling back, and the voice came again. Not behind her this time, but from inside the crib. Stay awake with me, Claire, forever. The last thing Claire remembered was the sound of the parents' car pulling into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the windows. She screamed, banging against the nursery door, but the walls swallowed her voice. By the time they opened the front door, the house was silent. They found her phone on the floor, the knife on the counter, but no Claire. Upstairs, the daughter's room was empty, bed neatly made. No sign anyone had been there at all. But in the sealed nursery, the doll lay in the crib. Its porcelain face cracked wider now, almost smiling. And if you pressed your ear close enough to its painted lips, you might swear you could still hear it whispering, Claire. Episode 3. The photographer's deal. Do you ever notice how desperation makes you blind? Like you'll see a flashing red light, a big glowing stop sign, but because your wallet's empty and your belly's growling, you'll convince yourself it's just a trick of the eye. That was Tom's problem. Tom was a college sophomore, living off ramen packets. And dollar store bread, the kind of kid who scraped by, telling himself that it was all temporary, just a phase. One day, he'd look back and laugh. But when you're in it, when you're repawing through couch cushions for quarters just so you can buy another bag of generic coffee grounds, there's no laughter. Only the gnawing. So when Tom saw the ad on Craigslist, he didn't laugh, didn't even blink. $500 cash. Looking for a male model. No experience required. Must be 18 plus. Must be comfortable in front of a camera. 1 hour session. Artistic shots. Confidential. Respond with your name, age. In a recent photo, it was posted under gigs, right between a landscaping job and some guy looking for someone to help him move a couch. The pay jumped out at him like neon. $500 for 1 hour. That was more money than he'd make in 2 weeks stacking books at the campus library. He clicked on it. Read it again. 500. Now, you're probably already shaking your head. So am I, because I know where this is going. But Tom was 20 years old, broke, and convinced that the world owed him some kind of break. He thought maybe this was it, he replied. He sent a photo he had on his phone, a blurry shot at a party where he was holding a red Solo cup. Within an hour, he got a response. Perfect, you've got the look. Meet me tomorrow night at 9 p.m. My studio is downtown, corner of 5th and Main. Old brick building with a green door. You'll see it. Bring ID. Bring no one else. 500 cash guaranteed. Eric, Tom's heart did this little leap. He pictured walking back to his dorm with crisp bills stuffed into his pocket, enough to keep him fed for weeks. He didn't picture anything else, though maybe he should have. The studio was in one of those buildings that looked abandoned from the outside, dirty red bricks. Boarded up windows, graffiti scrawled along the lower walls. The kind of place you cross the street to avoid if you're walking alone at night. But the green door was there, just like the email said. A single hanging bulb above it buzzed and flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. Tom hesitated, hand on the knob. He thought about turning back, then he thought about $500. He pushed the door open. Inside, it was cooler, quieter. The hallway smelled faintly of mildew and something chemical, maybe paint thinner. His sneakers squeaked on old tile as he followed the dimly lit corridor toward the faint glow of light at the end. "Tom," a voice called out. A man appeared, tall, thin, dressed all in black. He looked like he could have been anywhere between 35 and 50, one of those ageless types. Balding on top, sharp nose, wire-frame glasses. His smile was wide but didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Eric," he said, extending a hand. His grip was clammy, the kind of handshake that makes you want to wipe your palm afterward. The studio wasn't much of a studio. It was just one large, mostly empty room with a backdrop pinned to the far wall and a couple of lights set up on stands. There was a camera on a tripod, but it didn't look particularly expensive. "Glad you could make it?" Eric said, motioning for Tom to come inside. "This won't take long." The door clicked shut behind them. Tom felt it in his spine, that sound, like the world outside had just sealed itself off. "What kind of pictures are we doing?" Tom asked, trying to sound casual. "Artistic," Eric said, grinning again. "Black and white, human form, very tasteful, nothing you'll regret. Just relax." He handed Tom a bottle of water. The seal was broken. Tom held it, but didn't drink. Eric fiddled with his camera, adjusted the lights. "You've got a good look," he said without glancing up. "Honest. Open. People are gonna love it." "People," Tom echoed. "Oh, not in the public sense," Eric said quickly, almost too quickly. "Private clients. Collectors. They appreciate authenticity. You're not one of those gym rats with fake tans. You're real. That's what they want." Tom shifted on his feet. Something about the way Eric said clients made the hair on his arms rise. But then Eric pulled out an envelope, fat, thick. He set it on a stool by the wall and tapped it. 500, as promised. Just a few shots, that's all. Tom swallowed. Thought about the cafeteria meals he wouldn't have to choke down, the nights he wouldn't have to go to bed hungry. Told himself it was harmless, just pictures. Just one night. But the air in the room felt heavy. Eric told him to stand against the backdrop. Click. The first photo snapped. Bright light flooded Tom's eyes. "Good," Eric said softly. Too softly. Like he was talking to himself. "Yes, very good." More photos. Tom standing. Tom sitting. Eric's instructions grew more specific. "Tilt your head this way. Now take off your jacket. Loosen your shirt. That's it, natural, perfect." Tom's unease grew with every click. The man's eyes behind those wireframe glasses weren't just studying him, they were devouring him. At one point, Eric stepped closer, adjusted Tom's collar himself. His fingers brushed Tom's neck, lingering just a beat too long. "You've got excellent bone structure," Eric murmured. Tom forced a laugh, but it came out brittle. Then the lights flickered. Just a little, a hiccup in the electricity. But when they did, Tom swore he saw something behind the backdrop. A shadow, someone else. He blinked. The light steadied. The shadow was gone. "Problem?" Eric asked, his tone flat, almost warning. "No," Tom said quickly. "Just thought I saw he cut himself off." Eric smiled again, that wide, empty smile. "Good! Let's keep going." Click, click, click. By now, Tom's mouth was dry. He still hadn't touched the water bottle. His eyes kept darting to the envelope on the stool. "That money. Just finish this. Just get the money and get out." But the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Not just by Eric, but by something else. The air seemed charged, buzzing faintly like static before a storm. Then came the final straw. Eric lowered his camera. "One last set," he said. "But for this, I need you to take off your shirt." Tom froze. "I didn't know it was going to be artistic." Eric cut him off sharply. The smile was gone. His eyes were hard now, glittering behind those glasses. You'll still get paid, but I need authenticity. Vulnerability. That's what sells. Tom's stomach turned. That word again. Sells. He looked toward the door. Too far. And the way Eric stood there, angled slightly between Tom and the exit, made it clear leaving wasn't simple. The shadow flickered again at the edge of the backdrop. Only this time, Tom knew it wasn't his imagination. It was someone else in the room, watching, waiting. And that was when the thought finally struck him. Maybe the $500 was never meant for him to spend. Maybe it was payment for something else entirely. Something he didn't want to understand. The silence stretched in that studio, long enough for Tom to hear the faint hum of the lights, the tiny click of the camera still cooling after its last shot. Eric stood there, one hand gripping the camera, the other adjusting his glasses. The smile was gone now, replaced with something colder. Shirt, Eric said again. Just that word, like a command. Tom's fingers twitched at the hem of his t-shirt. His brain screamed no, but his body felt like it was caught in molasses, dragged forward against his will. Then out of the corner of his eye, he saw the backdrop move. Just a little, like a breath. "Who's back there?" Tom asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Eric tilted his head. The glasses caught the light and made his eyes vanish behind the glare. "No one," he said softly. "Focus on me." But Tom wasn't focusing on him. The backdrop rippled again, and for a split second, he caught the outline of a figure pressed against it from behind. Tall, thin, motionless. Something in Tom snapped. He took a step back, knocking into the stool. The envelope of cash fell to the floor, spilling open. The bills fanned out, but Tom didn't look at them. His eyes were locked on that shifting shadow. "I think I should go," Tom said. His voice was shaky now, all bravado gone. Eric didn't move. He didn't block the door. Not exactly. He just stood there, camera hanging from his neck, head tilted like he was studying a specimen. "You came here for money," Eric said. His tone was calm, but under it was a tremor of something darker. "You'll get it. But you don't leave until I'm finished." Tom bent down quickly, snatched the envelope, and stuffed it into his pocket. His pulse thundered in his ears. He bolted for the door. Only the knob wouldn't turn. He rattled it, shoved his shoulder into the wood, but it didn't give. Behind him, Eric chuckled. "Studio doors swell in the humidity," he said, almost conversational. "They stick. You'll hurt yourself doing that." Tom spun around. "Open it now." Eric didn't answer. He raised the camera again. The shutter clicked. The flash exploded. And in that blinding moment, Tom swore he saw what was behind the backdrop. Not one figure. 3 pale faces pressed against the fabric, eyes wide and unblinking, mouths hanging slack, like wax dummies, corpses. The flash faded. The backdrop was still again. Tom's breath came ragged. He reached into his pocket, felt the crumpled bills, thought of his dorm room, the safety of his bed, his roommate snoring. He wanted nothing more than to be there. "I'm done," Tom said. He forced steel into his voice. "Keep the money if you want. I don't care. I'm leaving." Eric lowered the camera. His smile returned, thin and brittle. "You already took it," he said. "That means you're part of it now." "Part of what?" Eric didn't answer. The lights flickered again, and this time they stayed dimmer, buzzing angrily. The air in the room grew thick, damp, almost suffocating. And then the backdrop fell, not all the way, but enough to reveal what was behind it. 3 figures stood there, just as Tom had seen, but they weren't mannequins. They weren't props. They were people, or what had once been people. Their skin was gray, stretched tight over bones. Their eyes bulged, cloudy, but fixed on him. Their lips were pulled back into silent, eternal screams. They didn't move. They didn't need to. The sight of them rooted Tom to the floor, you see, Eric whispered. Authenticity, vulnerability, that's what sells. Tom stumbled back, knocking into a light stand. The bulb shattered, plunging half the room into shadow. In that darkness, the 3 figures seemed to lean closer. Tom screamed. It tore out of him raw, primal. He grabbed the broken stand, swinging it wildly. Sparks flew as it scraped the floor. Eric didn't flinch. "You'll thank me," Eric said calmly, like a father soothing a frightened child. They always do. Eventually, Tom hurled the stand at him. It clattered against the camera, knocking it sideways. Eric cursed, the first crack in his composure. That was Tom's chance. He lunged for the door again, twisting the knob with all his strength. This time, it gave way. He stumbled into the hallway, slamming the door behind him. Sneakers pounded against the tile as he ran, breath burning in his chest. Behind him, he heard the door open. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Not running because Eric didn't need to. Tom didn't stop until he burst out into the night air. The city lights blurred around him as he sprinted down the street, clutching the envelope like it was a lifeline. Didn't look back. Not once. Tom made it back to campus sometime after midnight. He collapsed on his bed, shaking, heart still racing. The envelope was still in his hand. He dumped it out onto the sheets. $500? Exactly as promised. Only something was wrong. The bills weren't crisp, fresh 20s like he expected. They were old, yellowed, torn at the edges. Some were stamped with dates from decades ago, and they smelled, not faintly, strong. A thick, sweet rot that clung to his fingers, no matter how many times he washed them. Tom never went back to that studio. He never answered another Craigslist gig again. But he kept the money. Every time he tried to spend it, though every single time something went wrong. Cashier would refuse to take it, saying it looked fake. A vending machine would spit it back out. A cab driver once threw it onto the street, muttering something in a language Tom didn't understand. So the money sat there, in an envelope, tucked at the back of his drawer. And every night, when the lights went out and his dorm room went quiet, Tom swore he could hear the faint click of a camera. Closer, closer, like someone was still taking his picture. Episode 4. The Room for Rent. Let me tell you something about Craigslist. It's like a bargain bin at a thrift store. You dig deep enough, you'll find gold. But most of what's down there is trash, broken junk nobody wanted. And every so often, you find something worse, something that should have stayed buried. That's where Kyle comes in. Kyle was 23, just out of college, drowning in student loans and desperate for a place to stay. He'd been sleeping on a friend's couch for 2 weeks. The friend's girlfriend had started dropping not-so-subtle hints that his welcome was wearing thin. So Kyle sat down one night with his laptop, scrolling through Craigslist like a gambler rifling through scratch tickets, and there it was. Room for rent. $250 a month, utilities included. Downtown, quiet house, serious inquiries only. $250. That was less than half what anything else in the city cost. Kyle's first thought was that it had to be a scam. Second thought was that he didn't care. He fired off an email, got a response within the hour. The room is available. I come by tomorrow evening. 117 Bellamy Street. Ask for Mr. Avery. No pictures, no phone number, just the address and the name. Bellamy Street was in one of those older parts of town where the houses leaned a little toward the road like they were tired of standing upright. The sidewalks were cracked, the streetlights yellow and sickly. Number 117 was a two-story house, narrow and tall, its paint faded to a dull gray. Kyle stood on the porch, shifting his backpack on his shoulder, and rang the bell. The man who answered was tall and thin, with neatly combed gray hair and a pressed button-down shirt. His face was pale, stretched with dark hollows under the eyes. He looked like he hadn't smiled in a long time, if ever. "You must be Kyle," the man said. His voice was deep, steady. "I'm Mr. Avery. Come in." The hallway smelled faintly of mothballs and something else, something metallic like pennies. The wallpaper was yellowed, curling at the edges. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Mr. Avery led him upstairs. The floorboards creaked under every step, groaning like they resented the weight. "The rent is $250, Avery said, due on the 1st of every month. Utilities are included. I don't allow guests. No overnight visitors. No exceptions. You may use the kitchen, but only between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. After that, the house must remain quiet." Kyle nodded quickly. He would have agreed to just about anything at that price. "The room is here." Avery pushed open a door at the end of the hallway. It was small, just big enough for a bed, a desk, and a narrow dresser. The window was covered by heavy black curtains. The air inside felt stale, as though the window hadn't been opened in years. Still, Kyle saw 4 solid walls and a roof. That was more than he had yesterday. "I'll take it," he said. Avery handed him a key, long and old-fashioned, like something out of an antique store. "The locks are unique, but safe." Kyle moved in that night. The first couple days were fine, but the rent was cheap, and Avery kept to himself. Still, Kyle noticed things. The kitchen was spotless, not just clean sterile. No dishes left out, no crumbs on the counter, no smell of food. The fridge was nearly empty, just a carton of milk and a loaf of bread. He never saw Avery cook, or eat, or even carry groceries inside. And then there were the rules. One night Kyle was up late, headphones on, scrolling through job postings. It lost track of time. Around 11 p.m., he padded down the hall for a glass of water. He'd just reached the kitchen door when he froze, because Mr. Avery was standing there. Not eating, not moving, just standing in the middle of the kitchen in the dark, his back to the door, head tilted slightly as though he were listening. Kyle's throat went dry, whispered sorry, and backed away. The next morning, Avery said nothing, but Kyle found a note slipped under his door. "No kitchen after 9 p.m. Respect the rules." On the 4th night, Kyle woke to a sound. It was faint, muffled. At first, he thought it was the old pipes or the house settling. But then he realized it was coming from inside the walls. A scratching sound, slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across plaster. He sat up in bed, heart hammering. The sound moved, traveling from one corner of the room to another. Then it stopped. Silence pressed in again. Kyle didn't sleep the rest of the night. By the end of the week, Kyle was second-guessing everything. The rent was cheap, sure, but there was something wrong with the house. The air was heavy, the shadows too deep. He'd catch himself glancing at the hallway mirror and swearing he saw movement that wasn't his own. And Avery. Avery never left. Kyle realized he had never once seen him walk out the front door. On Saturday morning, Kyle tried asking, "Do you work from home?" Avery looked up from his seat at the kitchen table. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless. "The house is my work," he said, and then he smiled for the first time. It was a thin, unnatural stretch of lips that showed too many teeth. But that night, the scratching came back. Louder, more insistent. And this time, it wasn't just the walls. It was under the floor. Kyle didn't sleep that night. He lay stiff in bed, listening. The scratching didn't stop, it traveled. Crawling under the floorboards, moving with slow, patient intent. Like something trapped in the belly of the house was feeling its way toward him. Around 3 a.m, it went silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that has weight. That's when the whisper came. Not loud, not even clear. Just a faint hiss sliding between the cracks of the floor. Down here. Kyle jolted upright, sheets sticking to his sweat. He pressed both hands over his ears, telling himself it was in his head. But it wasn't, because the boards at the foot of his bed groaned as if something on the other side had shifted its weight. He stayed awake until dawn. When sunlight finally filtered weakly through the heavy curtains, the house seemed almost normal again. Almost. By breakfast, Kyle had decided he needed answers. He found Avery sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded neatly, staring at nothing. The man didn't even look up when Kyle entered. "There's something in the house," Kyle blurted. His voice cracked. "In the walls." Under the floor, Avery's head turned slowly, almost creaking like an old hinge. His gray eyes fixed on Kyle. "The house is old," Avery said calmly. "Makes noises." "That wasn't just noise," Kyle insisted. "I heard." He stopped himself. He wasn't ready to admit out loud what he thought he'd heard. Avery stood, smooth and silent, and carried his empty teacup to the sink. "You must respect the rules," he said. "If you do, you'll be safe." Safe. The word hung in the air long after Avery left the room. That day, Kyle wandered the city aimlessly, unable to focus on anything but the house. By evening, against all logic, he found himself back on Bellamy Street, key heavy in his pocket, told himself he should leave, pack up, find another couch to crash on, hell, even sleep in his car. But rent that cheap was like an anchor. It kept him tethered to the house even as it strangled him. That night, the scratching came back, only louder and closer. Kyle pressed his ear to the wall. The sound was right there, just inches away, nails dragging, boards bending. Then faintly a voice, as if someone were speaking directly into the wood. Hungry. Kyle stumbled back, knocking over his lamp. The bulb shattered, plunging the room into thick shadow. And from the corner behind the curtains, something moved. He didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, Kyle confronted Avery again. "I can't stay here," Kyle said. His hands shook. "There's something wrong with this place." Avery studied him with an expression that might have been pity, maybe contempt. "The house chooses who it keeps," he said softly, "and it has chosen you." Kyle felt his stomach drop. What the hell does that mean? But Avery didn't answer. He only pressed a slip of paper into Kyle's palm. On it, written in neat, spidery handwriting, were the words, "Do not go into the basement." Kyle looked up, but Avery had already turned and walked away. Of course, that warning only made things worse. The rest of the day, Kyle couldn't stop thinking about it. The basement. What was down there? What was scratching under the floor at night? By midnight, curiosity had swallowed fear. He crept out of his room, the old key cold in his sweaty hand, and padded down the creaking stairs. The basement door was at the far end of the hall, half hidden behind a stack of boxes. The lock looked ancient, its iron surface mottled with rust. The key slid in easily. For a long moment, Kyle hesitated. Every nerve screamed at him to stop, to go back upstairs and forget. But the scratching came again, faint, rising through the floor like a pulse. He turned the key. The lock clicked. The door swung open on darkness thick as tar. The air smelled damp and metallic, like wet stone and old blood. Kyle fumbled for the light switch, but there was none. So he used his phone's flashlight, the thin beam cutting a narrow path down the steep wooden steps. The basement was bigger than he expected. The walls were bare stone, glistening with moisture, and in the center of the room was a circle carved into the floor, its grooves filled with something dark. Kyle stepped closer, light trembling in his hand. The circle wasn't just carved, it was burned into the stone, edges black and cracked. Symbols twisted around it, symbols that seemed to shift when he tried to focus. And inside the circle, the floorboards bulged upward, as though something underneath was pressing to get out. The scratching was deafening now. Nails, claws, fingers, he couldn't tell. But it was right beneath his feet. Kyle staggered back. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering against the floor. The light spun crazily, landed on the far wall, and there was Avery, standing perfectly still in the shadows. "You weren't supposed to come down here," Avery said softly. His eyes gleamed pale in the dark. Kyle's chest tightened. "What is this? What the hell's in the house?" Avery stepped closer, the circle between them. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "It's not the house, Kyle. The house is only the door." And then from beneath the floorboards, a voice answered. "Hungry?" The boards split. Something pale and skeletal pushed through, fingers too long, joints bending wrong. The circle glowed faintly red as the thing forced its way up, scratching, reaching. Kyle screamed, stumbling backward. But Avery didn't move. He only watched, lips curling into that too-wide smile. "The house is chosen," Avery whispered. And as the thing broke through the circle, dragging itself into the room, Kyle understood what that meant. He wasn't the tenant. He was the meal. Kyle never remembered falling asleep, but he woke to the sound of breathing. Not his own. Not human. It filled the rented room like a fog, thick and steady, as though the very walls had lungs. The light bulb overhead flickered weak, nervous. And in the silence between each flicker, he could swear he heard whispers sliding through the plaster, voices slurred, and wet, like a radio tuned to a frequency that wasn't meant to be found. He sat up, the sheets damp with sweat. The house was awake, and it was waiting. The landlord's rules repeated in his head like a mantra scratched into stone. Don't leave your room after midnight. Don't touch the locked door in the hall. Don't ask about the others. Kyle had broken 2 of them already. Maybe 3, if you counted the way he thought about the others. Imagined them moving around behind the walls, their shapes bending in the corners of his vision. His phone was gone. He hadn't lost it. No, it had been taken. Remembered leaving it on the nightstand. He awoke, it wasn't there. All that remained was a faint smear of something black and sticky. A residue that smelled faintly metallic like blood left too long in the heat. He tried the window, wouldn't budge. Glass was cold, too cold, as though winter lived behind it. His breath fogged against the pane, and when the condensation cleared, he saw not the street outside but a long, empty hallway. The same hallway from inside the house, stretching on forever. That's when he realized the house didn't just contain rooms, it was rooms. A maze that folded in on itself, a trap for anyone dumb enough, desperate enough to walk inside. The whispers grew louder. Kyle pressed his ear against the wall. What he heard froze his blood. "Stay," a voice rasped. "You're already here," another added. "We've been waiting." And then laughter, small, shrill, childlike. He staggered back, tripped over his shoes, and hit the bed. The frame groaned like a dying thing. He stared at the locked door across the hall through the crack in his own doorway. The metal padlock gleamed in the sickly yellow light, pulsing faintly like it had a heartbeat. That was it. He couldn't stay, not one more night. He grabbed his backpack, half-sipped, spilling clothes, and bolted for the hall. His footsteps echoed too loudly, each thud swallowed and repeated back to him as if the house were mocking him. The front door stood at the end of the corridor, or at least it should have. But when he reached it, there was nothing but another door, identical to the locked one. Rusted padlock. Same peeling paint. He turned. The hallway stretched longer, the house rearranging itself, like intestines twisting inside a living thing. And then he heard footsteps. Slow, bare, slapping against wood. The landlord. Kyle pressed himself against the wall, heart punching his ribs. The man shuffled into view, tall and gaunt, his robe dragging behind him. His face was wrong somehow, longer than it should be, jaw unhinged, just a little too wide. His eyes were pits. Not hollow exactly, more like filled with something blacker than dark, something that stared back. "You broke the rules." His voice was gravel dragged over stone. "They don't like when you break the rules." Kyle couldn't move.
Couldn't breathe.
The landlord leaned closer, close enough that Kyle smelled earth and mildew and something sweetly rotten, like fruit left in the sun. His lips peeled back in a smile. "Don't worry. You won't hear them much longer." And then the whispers erupted, screaming this time. Dozens of voices all at once, tearing through his head. He covered his ears, but they were inside him now, writhing and clawing. He ran, didn't think, just ran. Door after door slammed shut in front of him. The wallpaper melted into rot. The lights popped one by one until only darkness remained. And in that dark, hands reached out, cold, wet hands that grabbed his shirt, his arms, his hair. He screamed and ripped free, stumbling into a staircase that hadn't been there before. Up to 3, maybe 4 flights until his lungs burned and his legs gave out. He collapsed against a final door, old wood splintering beneath his weight. He shoved it open and found himself outside. Morning sunlight hit his face, blinding him. He staggered onto the cracked pavement of an alleyway. The house loomed behind him, tall and silent, as if it had never moved at all. Just an ordinary boarded-up duplex, windows black with dust. Kyle's chest heaved. Checked his phone back in his pocket. Battery full. 3:17 p.m. He hadn't even spent a night. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? He looked up once more. The curtains in an upstairs window twitched. For a moment, he swore he saw a pale face staring down at him, child smiling. He ran and didn't look back. Epilogue. 3 months later, the Craigslist ad appeared again. Room for rent, $300 a month. Safe neighborhood. All utilities included. The rules were listed at the bottom. Don't leave your room after midnight. Don't touch the locked door in the hall. Don't ask about the others. And this time beneath them, a new line in bold. Don't believe a word Kyle tells you. It belongs to the house now.